I'm James Brierton in Charlotte, North Carolina. We've got Frank Strait with us, and we're efforting a live report as we are continuing to track flash flooding happening right now in Columbia, South Carolina. We know of at least one water rescue that has already taken place. We'll get to Frank in just a moment, but let's start because seeing is unfortunately believing with this live picture provided to us from the USGS. As you can see scrolling at the bottom of your screen right now, a flash flood warning has been issued by the National Weather Service, and this goes until 7:45 p.m. Eastern time. Frank, if I'm understanding what I've been looking at on radar over the last little bit here, some areas of Columbia have seen upwards of 4 inches of rain in, what was that, an hour and a half or so?
Yes, about an hour to an hour and a half.
What have you been seeing? I know you're there in Columbia, and we'll have hopefully Chris Jackson joining us momentarily who witnessed one of those water rescues, but what are you seeing where you are, Frank?
Well, the water rescues that you've seen on Twitter, those were happening in the downtown area of Columbia and over toward 5 Points, which is sort of just east of downtown. That's the area that's seen the most severe flooding. The area where I live is in the northeast, or rather the northwest part of the metro area. I'm actually in Lexington County, but I could throw a baseball into Richland County and the city of Columbia limits where I am. And I've seen some less serious flooding in my area. The creek behind my house is the highest I've seen it in the year I've lived here. And some areas just downstream are flooding, including Fernandina Road. I took some pictures, went over that way and took some pictures of Fernandina Road, just very near the intersection of St. Andrews Road. And there's a low spot right there that is prone to flooding, and it's flooded now. Some people were trying to cross it, and that was a mistake. Some folks had their cars stall out. Fortunately, the flood waters in that area, they aren't rushing, but they are deep enough that some people probably are looking at some major car repairs, at least one person and perhaps two others that appeared to have their cars stalled just after passing through those flood waters in that area. Some other people making it successfully through, but they probably wish that they hadn't tried because it was not a very good area to try to pass through. And the reasons you don't want to try to cross floodwaters are not just because you're putting yourself in jeopardy. You're also putting your property in jeopardy too, as a few people along Fernandina Road will find out or have found out that the water gets up in your engine and it'll stall. You're looking at major repairs, and potentially if that water gets in your engine while it's running, you may be looking at a new engine. Thousands of dollars in repairs there.
We're looking on radar right now. We can see that this thunderstorm kind of came right over Columbia, and although it has transformed almost from a horizontal to vertical orientation, the rain is continuing to fall across portions of Columbia. And right there at the center of your screen, you can see that green polygon for the flash flood warning that has been issued. That is because rivers and creeks like the Rocky Branch, as you can see here on the USGS camera, if you're not familiar with this camera angle, this should be a road. And what we're looking at here is a creek that has overflowed and risen up over its banks. It's a fortunately infamous flooding spot. And if we take a look right now, Frank, at the latest gauge readings here from the Weather Service and the USGS, you can see that the water at the last measurement still continuing to climb. Latest observation about 2.5 feet, what is technically shy of flood stage according to this latest reading. But I wouldn't be surprised, having watched this over the course of the last little bit, that this is not yet going down. You can actually see as the camera has now panned left a little bit, not only telephone poles, but there's a stop sign out there on the left-hand side of your screen. And if you would think about the height of a stop sign, what is that, Frank? Probably a good 4 feet, 3 or 4 feet. Probably
it
from the
depends
grass.
on the stop sign, but probably 4 to 6 feet.
Yeah. I'm not super familiar with this particular portion of town, Frank, and I'm hoping you can help me out here a little bit. But what makes this such a treacherous spot that has become so infamous for flooding, and obviously a well-placed position for the USGS to have a camera like this?
Yeah, well, in my opinion, at least, it's just that the people of South Carolina have decided to build a city onto an area that drains into one small area. So now we have a lot of runoff going into that one creek there, the Rocky Branch, and as a result, anytime we get a heavy rain, it floods, and it's become pretty notorious for that over about the last 30 years.
Yeah, this is definitely not the first flash flood warning coverage we have done here discussing this particular area, as we have seen it time and time again. And let's go back to one of the videos that Chris Jackson shot in the downtown area of Columbia within the past hour or so, where you can see he wrote, "Car is occupied, actively floating away. 911 has been called. Creek has the car floating away." Now, we do have an happy update from this, which is that the two occupants of the vehicle have been successfully rescued. The car, I believe, is still missing in action, but the Columbia Fire Department being able to successfully rescue these people from this car. You can see not only do we have this flash flood warning in effect for the downtown area of Columbia, but then the broader green across your screen is the flood advisory, as we're continuing to watch heavy rain continue to fall over portions of the area. The National Weather Service is continuing to prioritize their storm warnings, but they've been able to put out a couple of local storm reports, or LSRs as they call them, to help kind of explain the situation that's been going on. You can see here the USGS gauge on Rocky Branch has crested at what was at one point at least 12.5 feet, which makes sense, Frank, because I think looking at that graphic a minute ago, I thought that 3 feet didn't sound quite high enough, so we'll have to try to refresh that graphic. This is, I think, a little bit closer. Video of flash flooding occurring at Divine and Hardin Street. I think that's probably where Chris Jackson was, if I had to interpret the local storm report. And continued flash flooding here with water above tires on cars as you make your way into the northern portions of the downtown area. We even have a storm report coming in, Highway Patrol reporting flooding along mile marker 64 of I-20. So although this, of course, is a classic downtown flooding incident, Frank, it's also, I think, a little bit more widespread than that, as you described seeing in your neck of the woods.
Absolutely. And if you would switch back over to radar scope and
Sure.
pull up the accumulation array precipitation estimate there, that will give you the 1 hour, latest 1 hour rainfall for this area. And we'll call your attention to the area that's close to where I live in the northwest part of the Columbia metro area. You'll see that there's a pretty substantial bullseye of 2 to 3 inches of rainfall that's occurred in that area.
I have the digital storm total up. Is that okay, or did you want something else here?
The digital accumulation array is what I wanted you to show.
Yep. Sorry about that. There you go. It's going to switch here in a moment, I suspect.
Okay. So,
there we go.
Right. You can see there's a good bit of rain that's occurred right in the downtown area of Columbia, too, over the last area. But I'll ask you, over
north.
the St. Andrews areas where I live, and you see that little bullseye. That entire area drains into the creek that I've been showing videos of on Twitter. So, and some of that area has gone over 3 inches. It's like 3.17 now. A minute ago, it was closer to 3.5 inches in an hour. But you get the point, is that there's been just a tremendous amount of rainfall in that area, and a lot of it's been flowing right behind my apartment here for the last couple of hours.
Yeah, it even looks like as we make our way further south of downtown, a couple other hot spots here where Interstate 77 comes in. And, you know, the National Weather Service bulletin was warning of 2 to 4 inches of rain having fallen. And I think you can kind of get an idea of how that might be plausible given some of these hot spots that we are seeing. Now, let me ask you this, Frank. Looking on the north side of town at the creek you've been looking at here, is this all going to drain then down into Columbia? Would what you're seeing on the north side of town directly impact what's happening in the downtown area?
No, it would not. That creek meanders its way through the northern part of the Columbia metro area over toward Broad River Road, and it ends up going into the Broad River there. So that goes into the river rather into the city of Columbia.
I understand. Appreciate that that local knowledge and explanation. Again, we're going to go back out here, take a look at this USGS camera, which luckily provides a vantage point of some of the flooding in the downtown area. You can see as the camera has panned up and out a little bit, the kind of landscape out in the distance with the buildings and the road, that stop sign there in the midst of the screen as well, continuing to show the depth of this water in kind of that downtown area, with the National Weather Service continuing this flash flood warning until 7:45. That's because, as we've been talking about, Doppler radar indicated thunderstorms producing heavy rain across the warning warned area. Between 2 and 3 inches of rain have fallen, with additional amounts of 1 to 2 inches possible. Flash flooding is ongoing in many areas and could begin in other areas as this warning does continue until 7:45. This includes Columbia, Cayce, Forest Acres, 5 Points, the South Carolina State Fairgrounds, and Olympia. Frank, not to put you on the spot, but it is obviously the 4th of July. Are there potential events in the Columbia area that could be impacted by either the flooding or the ongoing rain?
That's a good question. I can tell you that I haven't heard any fireworks being shot off anywhere yet, including that by individuals. And around this time a year ago, it sounded like an actual war was happening here in Columbia with people launching their fireworks at home. So thus far, I haven't heard any of that. I've heard plenty of rumbles of thunder and sometimes more than a rumble, loud crack or two, but haven't heard any fireworks yet from anyone. And yes, there are some local fireworks shows that have the potential to be impacted by this. In past years, we've had a fireworks show in downtown Columbia, but I don't think they're doing that one this year. I think that other areas are doing fireworks, but the one in downtown Columbia I don't think is happening this year. I think it suffered from the COVID pandemic over the last couple of years, and just weren't able to do it this year at all. So yes, I think some will be impacted, but I don't know what they are off the top of my head.
That's okay. I certainly would expect as folks are across the Carolinas preparing for another night of this holiday weekend that we could potentially see some impacts from some of these storms. And as we await a live report from Chris Jackson, who witnessed that water rescue in the downtown Columbia area, we're going to take a quick radar tour across the Carolinas because we know some of you are tuning in from elsewhere right now. And as we begin to look here in western North Carolina and the upstate of South Carolina, you can still see scattered storms moving through the Asheville and Anderson area, as well as Greenwood, South Carolina. And rain that came through Charlotte is now pushed down into Lancaster and Chesterfield counties. You can actually see, Frank, that outflow boundary that's pushing to the north and to the west out of Greenville, Spartanburg, and we'll see how that interacts with some of those storms coming down off of the mountainous terrain there of western North Carolina over the course of the next little bit. And this kind of is exactly what we're seeing elsewhere across the Carolinas as well. We can see an outflow boundary moving in now to places like Raleigh, and as that pushes to the west from storms that are now dissipating over the Goldsboro area, we're continuing to see new storms develop near Fayetteville and Clinton, and Greensboro at the moment seems to be escaping any of this rain. We'll see if that manages to hold on out. Back over to Columbia, you can see the heavy rain that continues over portions of the Columbia area. If there's any sort of small silver lining, Frank, it's that maybe some of the heaviest rain has now moved north and south of the city, but looks like precipitation could still continue to tamper down here over the next few minutes. And Charleston is no stranger, the coast no stranger to some of the rain we've been seeing today. I believe there was a severe thunderstorm warning earlier today in Charleston, if I'm not mistaken. Although the heaviest rains right now are outside of the Charleston area, you can see places like Barnwell and Orangeburg continuing with some rain showers moving through the area. We'll move up to the north. Myrtle Beach, dry, humid probably at the moment, I'd have to suspect. And places like Wilmington will be monitoring for some of those storms off to their north from Fayetteville to Clinton as we go on through the early evening hours. I think I got one or two more stops on our radar tour as we continue to look across the Carolinas on this 4th of July Monday. And I'm just repositioning our eastern North Carolina radar. It was a little zoomed in from the last time we used it, so you can see places like Elizabeth City right now, Rocky Mount, are dry and probably very, very warm. I was almost hoping for a little shower activity here in the Charlotte area this afternoon. We did get some because we were out walking along the Catawba River, and it was very, very warm. If you're just joining us as we come up to the top of the 7 o'clock hour, I'm James Brierton in Charlotte. We also have Frank Strait with us from Columbia as we are continuing to monitor flash flooding that is ongoing right now with a flash flood warning for Columbia until 7:45. We're hoping to bring you a live report here in the next few minutes from storm chaser Chris Jackson, who was down there and witnessed at least one water rescue, 2 individuals successfully rescued from a car thanks to efforts of the Columbia Fire Department. Chris is no stranger to Columbia and has witnessed many of these flood events in the downtown area. What you're looking at right now is a buffering camera from the USGS near Whaley Street of the ongoing flooding in the downtown area, and it is currently under the control of somebody that is not us, Frank, and I'm hoping that they zoom back out here a little bit because we are pretty zoomed in right now, but we will expect to see the street continue to be covered by water here, and I'm curious. We had this flood graphic. There we go, Frank. This flood graphic has now updated. Those of you who were with us 10, 15 minutes ago as we began our coverage, I was perplexed by the fact that it was only reading at about 3 or 4 feet. And now you can see how much this water has spiked here at the Rocky Branch, now reading 12.8 feet, well over that flood stage of 7 feet. This graphic makes a lot more sense than what we were looking at a few minutes ago, Frank.
Yeah, it's actually in record territory, isn't it?
Let's see here. I think you're right. That previous record looks to have been 12.4, and we might have very well set a new record for a very infamous flooding location.
Yep, looks that way. And no surprise, when you put the amount of rain that fell in Columbia in such a short period of time, it's no surprise that you saw a spike like that and that it's up into record territory. Like I said, a lot of the city of Columbia drains into that creek, and not much of the water can sink in because it's either paved or has a home or an apartment or a business built on it. So a lot of that water just simply runs into the creek now rather than seeps into the ground. And so it results in a lot of serious flooding in this area over the south part of Columbia now.
Yeah, okay. Our camera has luckily moved up a little bit to show us a better vantage point here. What we would expect to see is where some of that apparatus is on a pole. That's where the creek typically is, and if I'm not mistaken, it's actually down below street level, so it had to come up however many feet that is, cover the street that is then beyond that. The flooding right now is stopping short of this corner gas station, but you can see some cars in the background there, and hopefully the camera operator will take us back over to the left momentarily, and we can double check that stop sign that we had out there to get a sense of what the progress of the water is. I would imagine that 12.8 feet, Frank, is probably being measured by the apparatus, that pole right there in the foreground, and that's going to be 12.8 feet all the way down below street level. I mean, I think it's at least 3 or 4 feet down below street level based on having looked at this camera previously.
Yeah, that's my guess, is that 0 was probably the bottom of the creek bed, which would be probably 4 or 5 feet below the street level. I'm thinking. I haven't had a chance to get a good look at that stream gauge myself, but that would be my impression, is that the water is probably running about 5 or 6 feet deep in that area.
Yeah,
over places people would try to drive or walk.
Yeah, and that is a good reminder that flooding is certainly a deadly form of severe weather, and it kind of speaks to exactly what we're talking about right now. We can't tell exactly how deep this water is. Really, we know that it's at least 12, almost 13 feet in some of the places on the screen, but where is it 2 feet and where is it 13 feet? If you see water on the roadway, turn around, don't drown. That is the mantra from the Weather Service, and we'll repeat it here. And there again was that stop sign ever so briefly with the floodwater still at the very bottom portion of the actual sign, which probably gives us, again, about 4 or 5 feet. Look at the right square in the middle here. It almost looks like water is flowing off some sort of cement wall. You can almost see it splashing down like a waterfall. As this area of downtown Columbia remains submerged right now, and the camera operator continues to move around. Have you ever seen flooding like this in person, Frank?
Not like that in person, no. That's pretty impressive, and I hope I never have to see flooding like that. But sooner or later, I'm going to have to drive down there to just see what this looks like in person, because it's predictable. This is something that's happened. It happens a few times a year now. Sooner or later, it's going to happen again when we get a good rain over the city of Columbia. So one of these days, I'll have to go down there and take a look.
It's an unfortunate clockwork at this point. We'll take you back out here. We'll look at live radar. You can still see we have moderate rain falling across the Columbia area. Some of the deeper reds have moved off to the north and the south, and the total area of rain coverage right now across Columbia is dwindling, but still continuing. And we have about 45 minutes left on this flood warning. You can see as we push into the downtown area, that camera we've been looking at is about right on in here on the kind of the southern half of the downtown area. We can see some of these flood reports that the National Weather Service has managed to turn around already, and I would expect to see more of these as they are continuing to monitor the situation. We'll pull back out to kind of show you again the lay of the land right now if you're preparing for a 4th of July celebration ongoing across the Carolinas. Luckily, it is not any sort of washout. Some of these storms clearly can be strong, as we are seeing in the Columbia area, and some of them producing lightning. I always like to remind this time of year, Frank, there's no such thing as heat lightning. If you are close enough to see lightning or hear thunder, you're close enough to be struck by lightning, and be sure to seek shelter inside.
Absolutely, and definitely don't try to drive through those floodwaters. And in addition to you putting your safety in jeopardy, you run the risk of losing your property, that being your car, because as I mentioned a little while ago, the water gets up in your engine. You run the risk of losing that engine and spending thousands of dollars to get that fixed.
Yeah, let's look at that picture again from Chris Jackson. He put on Twitter a little while ago. He witnessed a water rescue. The folks of this car have now been rescued successfully. I think their car is still missing in action, but you can see some of the floodwaters here in the Columbia area submerging the whole front of this car, as Frank was just describing. Not only is this car likely a total loss, luckily these folks were able to make it out safely. We're hoping to hear from Chris in just a few minutes. He's got the dial-in information here. As soon as he's in a position to call in and describe to us what he saw, we're hoping he'll be joining us here on this continuing coverage from the Carolina WeatherNet on this July the 4th, 2022. I'm going to read this comment that just came in from somebody watching. This is Stormin Charlie watching on YouTube. It seems like something is keeping the railroad crossing active. I doubt it's a train because it's been active for about 30 minutes. Frank, having recently visited this area and kind of observed some of the Norfolk Southern and CSX rail operations in the area, wouldn't be surprised if they got trains waiting close enough that they got a crossing down, or probably more likely the water itself interfering with the electronics could either have shorted something, or maybe there's some sort of precaution in place that when the water intrudes, the system defaults to some sort of safe down position. I'm not sure, I'm speculating, but we do certainly have a lot of railroad activity in this area in addition to the cars.
Yeah, that would be my guess, is that just the water has gotten into the switching system and caused it to either default into the fail-safe arm down mode, or perhaps it's just caused a malfunction of some sort, or as you mentioned, the train being near the crossing but not able to pass through it is a possibility as well. So yes, but it's fine, at least for car and foot traffic, because you shouldn't be going through those flooded areas anyway.
Taking another look here at storm reports, National Weather Service says, as we mentioned at the top of our broadcast, between 5:25 and 6:25 in the course of an hour at MLK Park, 4 inches of rain fell here in this portion of Columbia and Richland County, which is an absolute absurd amount of rain to have fallen in such a short period of time, and certainly kind of explains why, in part, we're seeing the flooding we are seeing. It's interesting to watch some of the customers continuing to go from the gas station and the convenience store. I mean, maybe they live in this area, they've seen this enough times that they're no longer amused by it, but we continue to see at least one car here in the background, and I would say this water is currently holding. I don't see it going up or down here now as we come to 7 minutes past the 7 o'clock hour.
James, I've been taking a look at some of the rainfall reports from the Richland County Weather Information Network Data System, RC Winds is the abbreviation there, the acronym there. There are 4 different gauges in the downtown area of Columbia, and each one of them has reported at least 4 inches of rain from the storm today.
Wow.
There's one at the headquarters office. That's, let's see, that's near, that's just north of Gervais Street, and that's 4.09. There's one in the 5 Points area that's reported 4.33. There's one along Assembly Street near Hampton Street, reported 4.37. And then there's another along Gervais Street near the Congaree River that's reported 4.33. In addition, there's one near Riverbank Zoo. That's only a few miles from where I live, 3.11. And the closest one to me, which is along Broad River Road near St. Andrews, is reported 2.6.
Absolutely incredible amount of rain. We know portions of the Carolinas are in some form of a drought. This is obviously too much rain too quickly as we now look at the sky over Columbia, South Carolina from the University of South Carolina, courtesy of this weather stem camera. You can see things remain kind of dark and gloomy as we are still awaiting the last of the rain to move out of the downtown Columbia area. And you can see off on the western side that some of that sunset trying to sneak on through. So we're hoping if you're watching from Columbia or elsewhere across the Carolinas, that we can still get in any fireworks shows or barbecue activities that might be happening. Again, be careful with lightning and thunder. That is something that is certainly deadly, and no amount of lightning is ever going to prompt the National Weather Service to issue a severe thunderstorm warning. So don't wait for a warning before seeking shelter. If you see lightning or hear thunder, be sure to seek shelter immediately.
Right. And as we've seen in a couple of situations elsewhere around South Carolina today, the lightning can strike well away from the area that's seeing rainfall. Jared, as CHSWX on Twitter, brought that out earlier today. He noted that a lightning strike occurred about 9 miles from the nearest thunderstorm. And it occurred in an area where there'd be a lot of people in Charleston proper. So that's one thing you have to keep in mind. If you have a nearby thunderstorm, you're at risk for lightning, and you need to move indoors when the thunder roars.
Yeah, we were at a fireworks show in Matthews here outside of Charlotte on Saturday, and we could see lightning off over Lake Norman, which, that was some 25, 30 miles away, lighting up the northern sky. So not only can you see it from a fairly good distance away, but as Jared explained earlier, and as Frank has just repeated, you can actually be struck by lightning from a thunderstorm, even if you're not within that rain, because it can strike. What did you say? 9 miles, Jared observed just today, and I think we've seen and heard higher amounts than that.
Yes, 9 miles, and it's been noted in the past it can happen even farther away.
Let's take a look here at Charleston on this 4th of July evening as we are continuing to see some scattered clouds, but no rain right now. Looking live from the College of Charleston, we did have thunderstorms roll through the Charleston area and the lowlands of South Carolina earlier, but right now all of the attention is here in Columbia. We appear to have a new emergency vehicle, Frank, coming up on our flash flooding in the downtown Columbia area. We'll watch to see what this presumably fire department vehicle is going to do. It looks like it's towing something, maybe perhaps a boat. We'll find out what their activity may be here momentarily.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what it looks like. It looks like it's pulling a boat in.
Yeah, the Columbia Fire Department, we know, has done at least one water rescue as a result of this flash flooding. Storm chaser Chris Jackson was down there when he watched a car get submerged. Fire department came on scene, rescued 2 people. Their course priority was for the lives inside the car and not the property that is the vehicle itself. And we're waiting to see now maybe if this camera will pan off to the right so we can see maybe perhaps where that emergency vehicle went. Frank Strait from Columbia is on with us. We're hoping to hear from Chris Jackson momentarily. This is the voice of James Brierton, and you're watching Carolina WeatherNet flash flooding coverage here on this July the 4th. And I hope you're all having a safe and otherwise enjoyable holiday weekend. And there we go. We got somebody at the controls. Now, this is a USGS camera that is available not only to officials, but also to the general public. And so we all kind of take turns moving the camera around. And it seems like somebody has the controls now and has panned off to the right as that emergency vehicle was pulling back out of the parking lot area. And you can see here how high the water has come up around the surrounding trees and shrubbery. I know the last time Chris Jackson was down there and we were talking to him afterwards, he actually recorded some video of some of these trees toppling over in the very wet soil as a result. And there goes the fire truck off in the distance. So perhaps they're patrolling or perhaps they're looking for something elsewhere as we're continuing to look at this near Whaley Street in downtown Columbia, where the National Weather Service has a flash flood warning in effect for at least another half an hour. And we'll wait to see what they decide to do regarding the expiration time. 7:45 is how it reads currently.
Right. And I imagine they'll have to extend at least for parts of that area because even though the storms have more or less rained themselves out over the Columbia area now, the runoff continues and we're going to see flooded areas for a while this evening.
As a reminder, if you see flooded roadways, turn around. Don't drown. You can't actually tell how deep some of the water is. Some of this water may be 2-3 feet on the roadway surface, but there's also a creek within this camera shot that is another 4 or 5 feet below water level that is recording at about 12 feet total depth. And if you were just simply walking across this right now, you would have no way to know where the street flooding ends and that submerged creek is. So that would certainly be startling and very, very potentially deadly as we continue to watch this flood waters here. If we can get the camera to go back to the right a little bit, there's a stop sign there that we've kind of been using as our beacon to know whether or not the water is going up or down. But you can see the water has certainly moved into the adjacent parking lots. Not too far from structures, Frank, I'll point out. We certainly have some structures in this area.
Right. And the flooding is not just confined to this area on Whaley Street. Just flipping through Twitter here, some local reporters and meteorologists here in the Columbia area are tweeting out pictures and video of areas on the USC campus that are flooded, and some other areas around Columbia. Maxie Gregg Park, for example, is one of those areas that's flooded currently. So it's not just the area around Rayleigh Street right now. There's other areas in Columbia that are experiencing some flooding too.
Yeah, I suppose that makes sense. And luckily we have this particular camera here so officials can see what's going on. But taking a look at some of what you're looking at there on Twitter, Frank, we'll pull your feed up as you've been retweeting some of these. You can see, as you just mentioned, other areas of the downtown in Columbia continuing to deal with this flash flooding that, regardless of its 7:45 expiration, to use Frank's words, is going to be continuing portions of the area as we go on through portions of the overnight. I mean, Frank, you've lived in this area for a little while now, and you're from the Carolinas, and you mentioned off the top of our broadcast that Columbia is no stranger to flash flooding. But how does this relate? We know we have record flooding at the USGS camera site Engage, but have you seen scenes like this before?
Nothing like this. This is the most significant I've seen, and I've lived in Columbia now for about a year. And this is my second stint here. I lived in Columbia for nearly 4 years back in the 90s. I don't recall seeing flooding like this. Even back in the 90s, I saw flooding along Whaley Street a few times, but nothing that measures up to some of these pictures we're seeing here. This is really impressive to me.
Is this the tweet you were referencing that's on the college campus?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, we could see at least a vehicle there. Hopefully that vehicle was not occupied, as you can see the water has come up to the tires and then possibly beyond that.
Right. Yes, that area is not far from the Maxie Gregg Park that is currently seeing some pretty widespread flooding right now. Wheat Street is actually that phys ed center is pretty much right across the street from that park. And it's upstream from the area along Whaley Street that's also flooded now.
I suppose if there's any silver lining here that the college campus more or less will have less people on it than it would during a fall or spring semester. They may certainly have some summer activities going on, but that may mean that we had less people impacted than had this flooding happened at another particular time. And we'll bring you back out here to Radar Scope, where, Frank, I think we're beginning to see some good news. The rain has certainly lightened up a bit over the Columbia metro area, and I presume is also beginning to lighten up where you are?
Yes, it is. It's only drizzling a little bit right now here.
That's good. That's what we need to get back onto the course of trying to lower some of these water levels back on down, as the flash flood warning will continue for a little less than half an hour from now. And let's see if we go back out to that camera site whether or not our gauge is updated, whether or not we have any updated observations here, and we'll bring you back out to this camera, and it looks like we're still reading at a record-breaking 12.8 feet right now, as some additional crews have showed up on scene to tend to the ongoing flooding. And Frank's absolutely right. This is one location that's flooding, and it's one location with live video, and that's what we're showing you. But we do certainly have other areas of the Columbia metro dealing with flash flooding, and this is something that's going to persist as the water basin now has to try to deal with all of this runoff. I'm trying to interpret what some of these crews may be doing here. Frank, I don't know if you have any guesses, but they certainly look like some officials on scene to assess the situation.
Right. Yeah, I'm not sure what they're up to either. But obviously they're assessing something in that area. I'm not sure if there's probably something happening just off camera that we can't really see. But clearly they have a job to do of some sort there.
And we'll continue to monitor this here for a moment. We're still hoping to speak shortly with storm chaser Chris Jackson, who was down there when some of this flooding was peaking and witnessed a water rescue. He's a former firefighter, now a storm chaser, and as he documented in his tweets, there were 2 individuals inside a submerged car. 911 was called, and the Columbia Fire Department came out and rescued those 2 individuals. I wouldn't be surprised if it was Chris himself who made that 911 call, as storm chasers often are the kind of the first on scene. I think we might have some slight improvement being observed in this camera, as I can now see on the right-hand side of your screen what I believe is kind of the wall of the creek itself. Again, that creek is kind of maybe 4 or 5 feet below street level, and there seems to be some sort of concrete structure there that I think is the outline of where that creek is actually located. And now that we're able to see that, it makes me wonder if the water has come down maybe just ever so slightly from its record-breaking 12.8 foot crest. Certainly enough water here that it remains a problem, and the camera is panned over to the left. I would say, yeah, looking at our stop sign again, we have slight improvement. So as now some of the heavier rains have begun to cease across the Columbia area, we can now hope that this won't be going up, but is on its way back down slowly. It's 7:20. James Brierton here in Charlotte, and we're looking at these live pictures from Columbia, South Carolina, of ongoing flash flooding on this 4th of July holiday. And we have, again, a report of 2 people successfully rescued. No reports of any other injuries associated with this flash flooding. And we hope to keep it that way, as strong storms across the Carolinas do bring the potential for some heavy rain, potential for some flooding. The biggest threat from them is most likely going to be lightning. We're likely not looking at any sort of strong winds, severe winds, or tornado risk across the Carolinas today. We do have the chance of seeing some storms move through, a slight risk issued by the Storm Prediction Center for Wednesday, and we'll be keeping a close eye on that. Can actually show you those Storm Prediction Center outlooks. You can see the Carolinas today in this light green, meaning just general run-of-the-mill garden thunderstorms, afternoon thunderstorms, and as we look through tomorrow, you'll begin to see a risk that's going to be moving in from our north. You can see portions of that marginal and slight risk across portions of Virginia, West Virginia, and Ohio. And then as you look ahead to Wednesday, if we can get that graphic up, here it comes, you can see that slight risk will then push on down to include much of the North Carolina area and portions of South Carolina, including the Sandhills and the upstate. On Wednesday, we're looking at about a 15% chance of seeing some severe storms potentially damaging in those same portions. We'll keep an eye on that here at the Carolina Weather Group, home of our weekly Wednesday web show. Wednesdays are the day we release episodes. We are anticipating releasing a best of episode on this Wednesday as we continue to kind of try to celebrate a holiday week here. But we will continue to monitor the severe weather, and just like we are right now, if we need to pivot and make any changes to our plans, we certainly will. Looking elsewhere across the region right now, we have this WeatherStem camera in Augusta. You can see cloudy skies across the area. We'll show you Charlotte as well, where we have just a few remaining clouds across the Queen City. And luckily right now, the only sort of severe weather that is happening is that flash flooding ongoing in the Columbia area. We do still have some strong storms scattered out across the Carolinas. The only one that the Weather Service currently has any associated warnings on is that flash flooding. We don't have any severe thunderstorm warnings out there right now, but as you can see, we do have a number of stronger storms over here towards Anderson, outside of the Augusta area, and if we switch radar sites maybe towards Wilmington, you can see over here towards Smithfield some stronger thunderstorms as well. Nothing right now that the Weather Service has decided to warn on other than the ongoing flash flood warning, as continuing here in the Columbia area. We'll take you back out now to those live pictures provided to us from the USGS. When we last saw these pictures, the water was beginning to come on down just a little bit, and you can kind of see that there with the stop sign in the distance. Water within the last 45 minutes or so was at the bottom of the stop sign itself, and you can see now we have a bit of a gap. More of that pole is exposed. Off to the right-hand side of your screen, at last check, we had some crews, looked like maybe city crews, out checking the water levels as we're continuing to watch this flash flooding with a warning associated with it for Richland County until 7:45. New storm report in from the National Weather Service, kind of explaining what it is we've been seeing here, but they were looking at video posted on Twitter showing that flash flooding, this one near Pickens Street, near Pendleton and Green Streets on the University of South Carolina campus, where a car was submerged with the driver standing on the roof. I don't know if I've seen that particular picture, Frank, but it seems like the Weather Service has, and that again paints the picture that yet another water rescue having played out during the course of this flash flooding that has been ongoing here in the Columbia area. You can see, again, more of the street. We can see more of that perimeter brick wall, and those crews are now putting up roadway barriers to try to keep people out of the water. In case it wasn't self-explanatory enough before, we're going to put these barriers up to try to tell people, please don't proceed through the intersection, even though we can now see portions of the intersection. Again, you don't know how deep. That water on the left and the water on the right side of your screen are very different depths, because the right-hand side of your screen is where that creek goes down about 4 or 5 feet from the top of that wall. The left-hand side of your screen matches what's in the background, where we have that street level. But, you know, if it wasn't for the fact that we could see just a little bit of that wall right now, you'd have no way of knowing that the left side's maybe 2 or 3 feet deep and the right side's maybe 10 feet deep.
Right. And in addition to that, you don't know what the condition is of the road itself under all that water, because you can't see it. So part of that road surface could be washed away. And when you try to cross it, well, you could end up in water much deeper than you expect.
Absolutely. That is a very, very good point. And this is an area that deals with a lot of this, and I'm sure gets scrutinized pretty heavily now. Now, here's the trick. Now that they got these barricades up and now that the crews are pulling away, I'm sorry to say that some genius is probably going to drive around them sooner rather than later, but let's hope I'm wrong.
It'll probably happen. I hope not, but it'll probably happen.
Yeah, luckily it's not this guy. We can see this gentleman turning around here. You know, we have USGS cameras in the Charlotte area that I watch fairly closely in my home city here, and there's one in particular on the southeast side of town that is positioned in a neighborhood that floods fairly often, kind of like this, where the creeks will overflow onto roadways, and it seems a dime a dozen. Like every time it floods, somebody drives across it, and it makes me very angry when it happens.
Yes, it really does kind of frustrate you to know the kind of things that can happen and see people still make the foolish choice to drive through floodwaters.
Looking at some comments, thanks for joining us on YouTube. One comment reads, "This flooding is nearly as bad as the flooding of 2015. I don't recall that in particular. I don't think I was on the show yet, but I know we seemingly have set a record on the USGS gauge today, and certainly some severe flooding one way or the other. In just moments, we're going to talk to Chris Jackson, storm chaser and friend of the Carolina Weather Group, who's been down in Columbia and observed at least one water rescue. And I know Chris is in the process of getting connected with us right now. Chris, can you hear us?
Yeah, can you hear me, James?
Yeah, we got you. We've been looking at the USGS camera. It looks like the water is starting to come down, but certainly still ongoing flooding right now in the downtown Columbia area.
Oh, for sure. The crest occurred probably about 40 minutes ago, maybe 45 minutes ago-ish. And the water on Rocky Branch Creek has probably come down a good, I would say, maybe 2 to 3, maybe 4 feet now. But it's starting to rapidly descend, thank goodness. What transpired down here this afternoon was nothing short of incredible.
Yeah, Chris, take us through what you saw. We saw some of your Twitter pictures, including the one car that was submerged in the water. Can you bring us back to those moments that you were watching unfold?
Right, absolutely, James. So I've made the decision to come down here to Rocky Branch Creek just because I know what kind of flash flooding it's capable of doing. And given the atmospheric setup today with, weak steering flow aloft, and moisture and precipitable water values over 2 inches, the threat of flash flooding today was going to be pretty significant if storms could fire over Columbia. And once it became evident that was going to happen, I got down here to Rocky Branch Creek and got down here about when I needed to get down here. In a matter of 6 minutes, the roadway went from being relatively dry with heavy rain falling on the road to having over 2 foot of water with rapids across the road. And while I was shooting video, two males in a car just drove straight into the floodwaters, and the creek immediately took their car and began to sweep them away. Thankfully, the creek actually was able to deposit them against the train trestle that's adjacent to the intersection here at Main and Whaley Streets, and they were able to extricate themselves and kind of half swim out through the water in about chest deep water just as the Columbia Fire Department was arriving.
Yeah, Chris, we were speculating looking at the local storm reports and looking at your tweets that noted that you weren't just observing this, but a 911 call had been placed. Were you the one who placed that 911 call, and what were those moments like as you were watching that rescue?
Yeah. I really felt pretty. I've come down here for flash floods quite a few times, and caught quite a few cars going in the water, but none of them have been taken by the floodwaters in the aspect of they immediately start floating away. And given the flow that was going on down here, I was immediately concerned, given my background as a swiftwater rescue instructor, 15 years at the fire department and doing swiftwater rescue all the time. I was really, really concerned. And when that vehicle got in the water and they began to get swept away, I had a lot of soul searching to do after 911 was called, because I really thought about jumping in there and getting those folks out of that car. But I didn't, because I saw them getting, deposited against the train trestle. And at that point I was like, they're going to probably be okay. But definitely concerned for a moment.
We're glad that you're okay. We're glad that they're okay. We're continuing to look here, and the situation seems to be rapidly improving itself with the water continuing to go on down. You mentioned you've been down to this location numerous times as a storm chaser and as a local resident to observe this infamous flash flooding, and we were observing, Frank and I, on the USGS gauge that this appears to be record-breaking floods for at least this particular station that the USGS operates. Can you paint that contrast for us? How is today any different than all of the other times it floods down there?
Oh, sure. Absolutely. So for reference, Rocky Branch Creek here at South Main and Whaley has always, been a local, what we used to call in the fire department, a hotspot. And hotspots are areas where you got, issues that occur on a common basis. But today, from the other floods I've seen, even earlier this year, we had a good one. Today was just a whole different animal. At one point, the stop sign here in the intersection was under, I don't know how much water, but you figure you pull up to most intersections, the stop sign is going to be 4 to 5 foot tall to the top of the stop sign, and that stop sign was completely underwater. There was it wasn't even making any ripples right under the water, so that tells me there's probably at least 6 inches of water over the top of it. And I was talking to one of the guys over NWS Columbia, and he was telling me also that this can be a record crest, which is pretty incredible given the past. With the 2015 event. So much rain falling down here, but these heavy rain events that occur in a short period of time can present their own dangerousness just as significant in certain spots as something like a 2015 type event can.
Yeah, just as you were hopping on, Chris, and I'm glad you mentioned 2015, we had a YouTube comment from somebody watching who said this was rivaling that 2015 event. Can you take us back there? Remind us?
Yeah, so 2015 saw, just a ton of rain. I can't remember how much fell in Columbia, but I think it was somewhere probably getting close to 2 feet of rain. And that occurred over, a 36-hour period. And what we saw then was your big rivers, the Broad, the Congaree, the Lower Saluda behind the Lake Murray Dam. We also saw them go to near record levels. And that was mainly because of all the runoff, from the bigger areas. With these flash flood events, I just want to highlight the fact that you can take a lot of rain and put it in a small area and have the same type impacts on a localized scale. But 2015 was just, so much bigger in scope, scale, magnitude, because of how much rain fell over a bigger area in size. And, of course, in the Forest Acres area, you had every single lake and pond dam over there, which is like 10 of them. Their dams blew out, and it just started a cascade effect. and anything that was in its path was taken by it.
Chris, as you were talking and bringing us back to 2015, we're showing people the radar from the last 2 hours or so, and you can see what kicked off this just barrage of rain was the collision, it appears, of some boundaries coming off of some outflow boundaries from thunderstorms that were initially to the east and the west and the north of Columbia. They all kind of pushed and collided over Columbia at a perfect time and seemed to just saturate all of that moisture that was up there in the atmosphere. And again, less than an hour, we saw rain rates of about 4 inches. Chris, what is that like to be in 4 inches of rain in an hour?
It's hard to describe exactly how intense that rainfall is, but I mean, it's just think of the hardest rain you've ever seen in your life. I mean, 4 inch per hour rainfall rates. It is hard to get much, meteorologically speaking. It is hard to get rainfall rates that exceed that by any kind of really discernible amount. Once you get over that 1 to 2 inch per hour rainfall rate and start getting into the 3s and 4s, I mean, you're just talking about whiteout type rain conditions where you cannot see anything. So it's dangerous to anybody that maybe out driving on the road, might see a little bit of ponding what they think on the roadway, and next thing you know, could end up in a really bad situation. That's why it's so important for people to understand that if you do encounter a flooded roadway, the best thing to do is just to turn around and don't drown.
Frank, before we let Chris go, did you have a question for him?
Well, I did want to bring up just some statistics here. We're looking at the data from the RC Winds site, and I mentioned they have a few gauges around Columbia. The one I've been looking at here is the one at Martin Luther King Park. That's close to that's near Santee Avenue and Hardin Street in Columbia. That gauge, it reported the 4.33 that it reported came in the space of 2 hours. The peak rainfall rate I saw during that 2 hour period came between 5:45 and 6:15. 2.8 inches of rain fell in that 30-minute period. So that's 5.6 per hour.
yeah, that's coming down.
Yeah, that's some crazy rainfall rates.
Yes, it is. And the MLK Park is at the head. So I think I'm pulling up on another water rescue over here. I'm in Olympia now, but the MLK Park is at the head of Rocky Branch Creek, so that's probably a good gauge to figure out what kind of rainfall occurred at the top of the watershed.
Right, and like I said, 4.33 in 2 hours. It's just really crazy. And other heavy rain occurred around Columbia too. The one at the Richland Library on Assembly Street there, they had 4.37. I'm guessing that happened in about 2 hours too.
Yeah, that's what I've been talking with Hunter Coleman over at NWS Columbia. That's what he had told me. And just to paint another picture for you guys real quick, I'm on Olympia Avenue. If you guys have a map or anything, Olympia Avenue at the Olympia and Granby Apartments, the old mill here in Olympia. And Columbia Fire Department's here. They're Engine 2, Rescue 1, rehab truck. Looks like a battalion chief 2 probably. But there's currently cars that are, they have water up to the doors. Well up the doors, with white water still running over Olympia Avenue right now.
Got a map of that coming up on the screen here. We did see some Columbia fire units earlier on the USGS camera seemingly maybe trying to make their way south to that scene as you've now kind of arrived there not too far from the fairgrounds in the south of the University of South Carolina area.
It appears we do have a car on the road here also that's been disabled, and it looks like they've already effected a water rescue on it. They got 2 boats out here, a couple kayaks. Their small pickup truck that carries all their boats and all their water rescue gear is also here.
Yep. Also worth mentioning, there's another USGS branch gauge that's a little farther upstream from the one on Whaley Street there. It's on Pickens Street. Relatively new one. It looks like it's only been around for a couple of years, but it also went into record territory. It went to 13.07. The highest crest before that was back on May 21st, about 10.5 feet. So that new gauge also has a new record.
Wow, that's incredible, guys.
Certainly. Chris Jackson, storm chaser and out in his own backyard today. We've been looking at your pictures that you've been tweeting over on Twitter. If people want to follow you or see them for yourself, they can find you at Chris Jackson SC, and can continue to follow your work. And I guess you'll be watching for any potential severe storms later on this week, Chris.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I appreciate it, James. And Frank, you guys take care of yourself. If there's anything I can do, you know how to get a hold of me. But I'm going to sign off for now and get on to shoot some video here in the Olympia neighborhood.
Thank you, Chris. We'll watch for that on your Twitter. Here's a live look before we go, where you can see the floodwaters have come back down along this portion of the Rocky Branch after what was record-setting at least 2 stages, or 2 different observation points, as Frank found, potentially more. And luckily, Frank, it seems like this is now getting better. I don't want to say it's gone, because as Chris was just describing and as you've been seeing, we still have the watershed that needs to absorb all this water, but we have turned a corner, I think.
Yes, that's the thing about these flashy kind of streams that we have in urban areas. They come up really fast, but they also go back down pretty fast. So at least we get that. The water does recede fairly quickly.
You can see what mess it has left here.
Yeah, a lot of mess to clean up there.
Yeah. Frank, I appreciate you joining us for this coverage, and I appreciate everyone joining us at home. Continue to stay weather aware as you go on through the rest of this 4th of July holiday. Obviously, many of you will probably be heading outdoors here if you're not already for activities across the Carolinas. Not a washout, not a severe outbreak by any means, but as you just saw happen in Columbia, some of these storms in the right place at the right time can certainly lead to flooding. Lightning will also be a risk. If you're watching us on YouTube, we're going to take you back over to Live Radar, part of our Carolina WeatherNet, which is streaming for free with live conditions across the Carolinas, where you can see radar, sky cams, and more of these warnings scrolling at the bottom of your screen. If you're watching on Facebook or elsewhere, we hope you'll check out our YouTube page or like and subscribe wherever it is you are watching from. Frank, thank you again. I hope you enjoy the rest of your 4th of July holiday, and happy 4th of July to everyone out there. We'll talk to you again real soon. This is James Brierton in Charlotte for the Carolina Weather Group.